Welcome to the Being There podcast. Stories from the road, where we keep the rubber side down. These are stories written by my father, Gene McAlmont. Commentary by his son, me, John McAlmont. Episode number 3. It's Full of Stars. Although written in 2002, the story commemorates the 1993 motorcycle trip to West Texas the author made with his son, John, me. It was a trip wherein both would discover new experiences, and it would open the author to a universe he had only imagined. I pulled the bike into a parking spot next to the ranger station and glanced into the rearview mirror. It was apparent that John was drenched from head to toe, and I could detect a slight shiver as he shut down his bike. I couldn't say I felt a lot better. It was colder and a lot wetter in the Davis Mountains than I had remembered. The park ranger stood looking at us from the doorway, and the slight smile on his face suggested his inner thoughts. Our camping spot was well situated amongst the live oaks. John had our tent staked out and was changing into dry clothing as I pulled a prized bag of coffee out of my saddlebags. The hot steaming cup chased away the wet chill. John unfolded a flyer he'd picked up at the ranger station. It said something about a star party at the observatory this evening. "Hey, old man, you can stay awake for this, can't you?" he said. The thought of getting on a bike again was not appealing, but now I couldn't refuse. We arrived at the McDonald Observatory just before 9. The parking lot was already full. A young man motioned us over to a reserved parking spot in front of the building and told us to park our bikes there. Mark had an easy way about him. He and John quickly made friends as they talked about bikes and all manner of adventure. We were surprised to find that he would lead the evening's activities. For the next few hours, John and I wandered in and out of the crowd, moving from telescope to telescope. Occasionally, I heard Mark pointing out a particular grouping of stars he called a constellation. I tried to see what he saw, but it was hopeless. By 11, the parking lot was empty. I was cold, and the thought of riding down this mountain back to the state park in the dark was not appealing. "The sky's just now getting dark enough to see the good stuff, and Dave's itching to try out a new telescope," Mark said. "Care to join us?" Without even so much as a glance, John was up the walkway headed for the observatory with Mark. Dave had already moved the 14-inch telescope onto its mount. It was a splendid instrument and much larger than the other scopes. Mark shoved a hot cup of coffee into my hands, and the smell of steaming coffee brought my senses online. John was grinning ear to ear as Dave started punching numbers into the scope's controller, aligning it with the stars. "What do you want to see first?" he asked. Someone mentioned the sombrero. Had I really come all of this way just to see a hat? When it was my turn, I grumbled a bit about the cold and the late hour and then squinted into the eyepiece, but there was nothing to be seen. Dave touched up the focus. John handed me my glasses. I tried again. Then, there it was. A slight brightening, a puff of cotton against a dark sky. "What is it?" I asked. "It's the light from 100 billion stars," Mark said. "It's the Sombrero Galaxy." The majesty of what I was seeing stunned me. I had never before seen such beauty, nor had I grasped the enormity of our universe. Yet here, floating in my eyepiece, was a star system, whose light had traveled hundreds of millions of years to illuminate my eye. For the next 5 hours, John and I traveled the universe with Mark and Dave. All thoughts of the cold and of dark highways had vanished. I often thought about that night, those years ago, and how it all started. Now I sat at the control of the 82 Otto Struve telescope atop Mount Locke, exploring the star-forming regions of M51, the Whirlpool Galaxy, with other amateur astronomers on this special night. It was almost 8 years ago to the day that John and I had made that first visit to the McDonald Observatory. That night I found the love of astronomy. I felt a hand on my shoulder. "I know you, don't I?" the man said. I turned to see who it might be. even in this darkly lit control room, I recognized Mark. A bit older, but it was Mark. We talked for a while and caught up on each other's lives, and then he had to leave to meet his wife and attend to other matters. As I sat there alone, surrounded by the universe, I was reminded how special that night with John really was, and the precious time we had together. I was reminded of the value of new experiences and of the connections we make. Yes, it is indeed a beautiful world. It's Full of Stars, written by Gene McAlmont, published in February of 2002. I remember that trip extremely well, too. Of course, I remember different things because, well, I'm a different person, and I see things differently than my father did, obviously. I remember being so cold. Back then, my dad had just gotten back into motorcycles, and that was my fault. Truth be told, I was young, crazy kid. I had a 66 Mustang Fastback, and I was showing off one night for some friends, and I ran it into a pole. And I had no money. I was working at this little radio station in all places, Greenville, Texas. And I took what little money I had, and I went down to the local motorcycle shop. I remember my girlfriend at the time drove me down there. And a guy had a motorcycle in the back, and it was cheap. And I bought it, and it was an old Yamaha. I don't even remember the model. And my girlfriend had said, "Hey, do you know how to ride a motorcycle?" And I said, "Well, my dad rode for years. Met my mom on one, so it can't be that hard. I'm sure it's in my genes." And off I went, in my jeans. Gene. Ha! Funny. Anyway, I rode that motorcycle to my parents' house for dinner one night, and was unsure what their reaction was going to be. Me, their son, on a motorcycle. And my dad came out, and my dad was always supportive, and so was my mother, always supportive of all of my crazy ideas. That's probably why I'm still making a living as an actor today. And I was ready for the talk about motorcycles and safety and all of that stuff, but something different happened. There was a spark in my dad's eye, and he looked at that motorcycle, and I could see something brewing in his mind. And it wasn't long after that he went and bought a Gold Wing, of all things. He had this aspiration of taking my mom on Gold Wing trips, and I think they went on one or two, but yeah, my mom was not into that. And so my dad, moved on to other more exciting and faster bikes. But on that particular trip to the Davis Mountains, he was on a Gold Wing. I was on a motorcycle, a Ducati. We had them all packed up with our camping gear. And what a spectacular trip it was. It was right before I moved to Los Angeles. And it was great bonding time that I needed with my dad, that my dad, he probably knew. Dads know everything, but I don't know that he understood how important it was to me to be on that trip with him. It was needed. And the astronomy was something that my dad had always had a little interest in, but that night sparked something that really took fire with him. So much so that when I was living in Los Angeles, he had found a beautiful telescope. Not sure if it was the one he was talking about in the article. In Long Beach, California, and I drove my truck down to Long Beach, loaded that telescope up in a U-Haul, and drove it all the way to him in Texas. Upon his passing, all of his telescopes were still in the barn, and I gave them all to one of his good friends, Wayne, who I know still has one of them and remembers my dad every time he looks through the eyepiece. Great times, great memories. My father was never one to take a hobby lightly. He always went the 110% on every hobby he did. Astronomy, motorcycles, candles of all things. And I got that from him. I always go all out on the passions that I like to pursue. And although I now see myself 100% walking in my dad's footsteps, I hear things coming out of my mouth when I speak to my daughters that my father told to me. I also like to believe that there's a little bit of my dad walking in my footsteps, like when I bought that motorcycle on a whim, and it sparked his love for two wheels again, and led into this beautiful career of writing these articles. Thank you for listening and spending this time with me. If this stirs your soul like it stirs mine, and you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and follow the podcast so you don't miss future readings and commentary. All written material featured in this podcast is the original work of my father and used with his permission. The thoughts and opinions I share are my own. This recording is for personal listening only. My voice likeness and performance are protected and may not be recorded, reproduced, or used in any form of AI training, cloning, or synthetic replication without my explicit written consent. Thanks again for being here. Until next time, keep the rubber side down and safe travels.